ドットバイドット CEO 兼プランナーの富永祐介です。ドットバイドットはテクノロジーであったりアイデアっていうものを生かしながら広告領域の仕事をプラスアルファエンターテインメント領域の仕事であったり IoT というような領域に自分たちの今まで培ってきた技術っていうのを生かしていこうというそういう集団です。働き方の特徴としてはリモートワークっていうものとあとは所属クリエイター制度っていうのがあります。所属クリエイターという制度は私たちの会社に社員として入っているのではなくて音楽のアート活動であったりとかさまざまな企業とコラボレーションしてテクノロジーを生かすプログラマーがいるんですけど私たちの会社の仕事と個人の仕事っていうのをうまいバランスでやっていくということで入っているメンバーがいます。シェアオフィスを渋谷に持っていましてそこに入っている映像クリエイターとかコピーライターとかそういう人たちと一緒に仕事することも多いのでメンバー以外にもたくさんの人が集まれるような場所を作ることでクリエイターとクリエイターのコネクトするような関係性っていうのも作れるようにやっています。
作者と申します。 CTO をやってます。最近はインスタレーションを作ったりだとかライブの演出もちょっとやったりとかもともとウェブの仕事が多かったんですけど画面を外に出る仕事が多くなってきましたね。で先でちょっとそのファイルを見たい時なんかは iPhone でささっと検索してファイル出してきて共有できる機能っていうのは結構いいですよね。デジタルの仕事がほとんどなのでデータなくなると全てなくなっちゃうのでクラウドにバックアップされてるっていうところをすごく心強く思っています。
やっぱりストレスが経験していて、結果その自分たちがクリエイティブに集中したりとかプランニングに集中したりとかっていうことに時間を使えているのでそれが効率的かなと思います。
それでは
Now we would like to have the keynote session Fireside Chat with Drew Houston, CEO and co-founder of Dropbox. And the moderator comes from the Wall Street Journal Japan managing editor George Nishiyama. We would now like to request Mr. Nishiyama to take over. Thank you very much. My name is Nishiyama, and I'm the managing editor of the Wall Street Journal Japan, and I'd like to continue on in English.
I want to start off the session, and great to have you, and great to be seeing you for the second time in 2 years. Last time we spoke, same session 2 years ago, exactly the same, great spring, cherry blossoms. So how do you liking Tokyo?
Well, first, thank you for having me again. It's great to be back in Japan. And I love it here. So part of it is we're visiting, we have an office in Tokyo, which I can talk more about, and part of it's for fun too. But yeah, lots happened in the last couple of years, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yeah, so as you say, last time we spoke here 2 years ago, one could say a lot has changed over the 2 years. Maybe some things have not. So I just want to start off with, we watched that video with your business, Dropbox, how things have changed in the 2 years, some of the notable changes that, that you feel has happened over at your company.
Well, so that video is a great example of shifting of our focus in the last couple of years. So inside the company, we talk about moving and evolving Dropbox from keeping files in sync to keeping teams in sync. Because in the beginning, when we founded the company in 2007, the problem that we were solving, or the opportunity we saw, was that life would be a lot better if our stuff, if our information, if our files could live in the cloud, because we were carrying around thumb drives and all the things we used to do. And fast forward to today, and now everything lives in the cloud, and that mission has largely been accomplished. But along the way, we realized that the most valuable thing that Dropbox does for people is not just storage, but in helping teams work together. And that video is a great example of that, and dot by dot, bringing people closer together, connecting people to the information that matters most to them. And so that's where we have, so that's been a big change, is us really focusing on that challenge of how do you make a great team. And the second thing that's changed is the scale. So we have 500 million people using Dropbox around the world, and 200,000 paying business customers. Last year, the company turned free cash flow positive. So the business is operating much bigger scale. And in January, we announced that Dropbox passed a $1 billion revenue run rate. And so it's been busy. We've been growing.
Okay. I think last time we talked about how, you know, cloud storage had become very sort of popular, and you had lots of competition. How do you feel about that now? I mean, we still, as I said, I think last time, you know, a lot of people use iCloud, there's Gmail, and on top of that, you have Dropbox. But you've come this far. I mean, how do you think, I mean, where do you think you stand in relation to those competitors?
Well, so we have had competition since the beginning. And for sure, there are a lot of great companies who we compete with. But when we look at why they still use Dropbox, it's because what we hear from our users is that it's because we pioneered the space. They love the simple design. They love the fact that it works, that Dropbox works equally well across all platforms and things like that. And while we have competition, at the same time, when we talk to our customers, no one is really solving their problems. And some of them are new problems, because now there's you have a lot of new tools that have come along when it comes to collaboration or working in a team. But the old ones, things like files and email and Office, haven't gone away. And so you have this fragmentation at work, which wastes a lot of time. And when you add up all that time, or when you really inspect it, it turns out that 60% of the time we spend at the office or at work is on what I would call work about work. It's the things like managing work. It's things like finding information, email, coordinating people. And there are a couple interesting things about that. So first, 60%. So what that's really saying is we only spend 40% of our time actually doing the work because of all this overhead. And then when you step back and think about that, what that's really saying to me is take your work week. You think about 60% overhead. Take Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, light it on fire this week, every week, for the rest of your working life, times a huge chunk of humanity. And so to me, that is a shocking waste of human potential. And that's something where Dropbox can play a big role in bringing that down.
And I think related to that, I think you have a new product out that is not just about, as you say, storing files. I think it's called Paper. And if you could just elaborate a bit on that.
Yeah, so Dropbox Paper is designed to be a really easy way to get your team to collaborate or to get on the same page. We found that even within Dropbox, that on the one hand, of course, we were using files, but then for real-time collaboration, we were using things like Google Docs. And Google Docs were great for real-time collaboration, but they became disorganized really quickly because you end up with all these documents and it becomes hard to find things. And then the other half of the time, we were using wikis. And wikis were great because unlike a traditional document, they're interconnected, kind of like the web. So it's really easy to find everything and make information public within your company. But the editing experience was really cumbersome. And so as a result, these wikis would become stale. And so we found that one way or another, we were always compromising. And Paper was born out of this idea of, like, what if you could have the best of both worlds? To have really seamless real-time collaboration. And so that's what Paper is. It's sort of you work collaboratively on a bunch of documents, but they're also organized and connected so that it's really easy to find the information you're looking for and has a lot of benefits of a wiki. And so that was the starting point. But then we found that we could go further. And what we were really trying to do was, can you recreate the experience of being in a room together or being in a conference room? And so Dropbox historically has been great for having your stuff. But what if Dropbox could become a place where you could still have your stuff, but then it could be a place to talk, And you could have text, or you could have all the elements of a document, but then bring together any kind of content. So you can have photos, videos, all kinds of information in a paper doc. And as a result, it's become the way we run our company, we just made it available publicly in January. A lot of our early customers run their companies on paper. So it's a new way of working. It's a new way to have all of your company's knowledge organized.
I think we journalists are one of the sort of, least sort of technologically savvy people, professions. But that said, I think, even I've heard of, software or applications like Slack, which to me seems like a bit similar to what paper would be doing. How is that different, and why would paper be better?
So Slack, so Slack is great for chat and real-time communication. Paper is great for how do you organize all of your company's stuff. And this is for all the knowledge that you want to keep around, whereas chat will, things will scroll off the screen pretty quickly. And so it becomes, we find that a lot of our teams use both. They use paper for all their content, and they use something like Slack or email for communication.
I see, okay. I just want to touch a bit on a broader topic. Again, in the past 2 years, I think we've seen a heightening of concerns about just the internet in general. We've had all the hacking allegations, and it's in the news all day, every day. That would seem to be working against something like your business, the cloud storage. How do you feel about the security issues?
Well, I think so. Security is top of mind for all of our customers worldwide, whether here or anywhere else. So it's a critically important thing, and no internet company would have a business if people's information weren't safe. But I think when you zoom out a little bit, every new technology, every new platform goes through a fairly predictable evolution, and the cloud is no different. So when commerce first came to the internet, I think we all remember being a little scared the first time we typed in our credit card number into some form on the web and wondered what all the kinds of bad things that could happen. But then you realize that there is so much more investment in security, and you're overall much better off typing or putting that information into a secure system than you just think about what you do at a restaurant, just hand your credit card to some stranger who goes off somewhere. And so while there are there's new security threats with the change in the model, overall we find, and our customers find, that they're much better off putting their information in a service like Dropbox or Google, whereas there's just enormous investment in this military-grade security that we can amortize across a huge number of customers. And ironically, we find that the customers who don't go to the cloud, or when you read about a lot of these high-profile breaches, it's because these corporations try to do this themselves. And so it doesn't happen overnight, but we're starting to see that that perception to shift, and people starting to understand that they're much more secure if they use a service like Dropbox.
So you're basically saying that, I recently read an article about some people going after personal cloud servers, that you could actually, buy a server and hook it up to your own internet and basically, have a private service so that it wouldn't be targeted by hackers. But what you're saying is that, a company like Dropbox or Google with that scale would provide the professional level security that no others could provide.
Absolutely, because you might think you're solving one set of problems, but you're really just creating a new set. And because now you have to become your own IT person, right? And then when you read about a lot of new kinds of exploits that happen, it's because your router had some problem, or now you have to rely on some open source project to keep everything secure. But in contrast, companies like Dropbox or other big internet companies invest tens of millions of dollars, have huge dedicated security engineering teams that are keeping on top of this stuff 24/7. And so when you add up all the risks and the benefits, it's still way in favor, or it's still much better for just about, for the vast majority of people and vast majority of companies to use a professional service.
Right. It's like, I mean, the notion of keeping tons of cash at your house.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. Just want to move on to another issue that's changed a lot in the past 2 years. You have a new president now in the U.S., and I think there are certain or very strong feelings in San Francisco or in Silicon Valley about the new administration. Apart from that, just in terms of specific policy by the new administration, I think the immigration issue is something that is of concern, not just Silicon Valley companies, but especially to companies that hire from a diverse pool of resources. Tell me about your feelings towards the immigration policy under the current administration.
Well, I think all of us, whether we're in America or outside, it's a bit of an unpredictable environment out there with the new administration. And for sure, when you look at immigration, one thing that's really important to us and our company is that we embrace people from all backgrounds, all religions, all origins. And so when you hear about things like a travel ban are antithetical to those values. And then when you zoom out, they're also antithetical to our country's values, American values. And we're a nation of immigrants. It's a source of major strength that we have all these really amazing people and students and just talented folks of all kinds coming from all over the world. And to turn our back on that, it's really bad for us. Might be a big opportunity for countries like Japan or others, but it's as if the countries that were competing with America were writing our immigration policy. So it's frustrating, but we're doing everything we can alongside the rest of the tech industry to take a stand.
Is it having an actual impact already in terms of, let's say, hiring or anything else to your business?
Well, it creates a lot of uncertainty, and it's very personal. So you have employees who are on, who maybe even are on a visa and have been granted various kinds of legal status, but the ground keeps shifting, and you keep hearing rumors that they're going to completely change how the visa system works, or people that are lawfully in the country are suddenly going to find themselves having to leave or not being able to have their family here, or they'll be on a trip somewhere and not be able to get back in the country. So this is an incredibly scary thing for really anybody who's in that situation.
You said you and some other companies will continue to take a stand. What specifically will you be doing to try to influence policy or change that?
Well, I think concretely we've done things. We've filed various, there are amicus briefs or various, gone to the courts to try to help efforts to combat things like the travel ban. And we're trying to find, and tech in general is looking for ways to have influence in Washington. But it's challenging. I think it's a very unpredictable policy environment. Everything keeps changing. It's not, I think we're all trying to find ways to get all this to a better place.
Okay. I want to ask a bit about yourself. I think that's probably the thing that the audience wants to know most about. So, initially you were seen as the most successful under 30 startup entrepreneur. Unfortunately, or naturally, time has come and you're no longer under 30. How do you feel about, and I think Dropbox is nearing its 10th anniversary come May. So I just want to ask a bit about the difficulties or the joys of management and being in a leader role at a company that's gaining scale. So just look back on the 10 years and some lessons that you've learned that strike out the most for you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, turning 30, it can happen to you if it hasn't already. But so I look back at the last 10 years, and Dropbox is going to have its 10th birthday in May, in a few weeks. And so when I think about that experience, it feels simultaneously like it's been 10 minutes and it's been 10 lifetimes. But it's really been an amazing adventure. And compared to other jobs I've had in the past, it's sort of the difference between like black and white and color. It just, the highs are much higher, the lows are much lower. I think that while, I think there's a couple things that happen. So one is the nature of your job changes, and the challenges get bigger. But at the same time, if you're systematic about training yourself and learning, then you get better. And there's a lot of stuff that would have kept me up late at night 5 years ago, which are problems that I can handle without worrying about it now. And I'm sure there are things that will happen in 5 years that I would be pretty intimidated by right now. But fortunately, all this happens one day at a time. But I think being systematic about learning and stretching yourself, and I agree with what Ben has said, is that the CEO skill set is very broad and very deep. There's a lot that you need to learn and know to be successful in business. But the good news is I found that it's all trainable, and all of this happens one day at a time. So you don't have to be good at everything all at once. And in a lot of cases, that's why you hire a great team, is to complement you.
So, but I mean, how do you go about systematically doing that learning experience? Last time I think we spoke, one of the things that surprised me was that you read a lot, or at least you used to read a lot, and you said reading was underrated. Is that some of the things you do, or what are the things that you do to sort of,
Sure. So I think I've found it helpful to have a lot of different inputs, is maybe one way to say it. Reading, for sure, has been incredibly valuable to me. And in the early days, when you start out as a founder or an entrepreneur, you discover, especially if you just have a technical background like I did. So I was good at programming, but otherwise knew very little about business. You learn pretty quickly there's a lot of stuff that you don't know. And my first solution to that was to go on Amazon and search and type sales, and then buy the top 2 or 3 books on sales, and do the same thing for marketing or strategy or financing or or management, all these different things. And so I found that you don't become a great manager by reading a book any more than you might become a great basketball player by reading a book, or a great musician, but it can help help move you up the learning curve faster. So reading continues to be incredibly valuable to me. And second is having friends and finding communities of people who are also interested in starting companies. And so I think a lot of you in this room might be surprised at how you'll run into each other in the future, or might find yourselves starting a company together. And I remember my entrepreneurial journey started at a startup conference, and a lot of the folks that I met there I still am in touch with, and maybe joined Dropbox or were starting companies. But having folks who have been through it, or who are going through it at the same time as you, or who are maybe a few steps ahead or many steps ahead, I found that I've learned a lot from different kinds of people. And I think the last is more of a mindset, where you just have to appreciate that you have to one of the hardest things about the whole process, you have to kind of get comfortable being uncomfortable. And so naturally there's a tendency, if there's something that's new, you want to run away from it because it doesn't feel good. And for me, that was things like public speaking, management in general. I mean, there's a long list. And when I've learned that instead of moving away from it, walk towards that discomfort. Because I think people would be surprised how much you can learn in 5 years. And sure, you're not going to become a great manager, a great leader in 5 weeks, but you can make a ton of progress in 5 years.
Right. So what are some of the things that you try to sort of, the uncomfortable things that you still give a shot at to be comfortable at being the uncomfortable?
Well, I think it's a good question. So one thing you realize is that everybody has weaknesses, and I got some advice. It's a blessing to find out about them. Right. And so to this day, I still have a coach, and I've had a variety of different coaches. That's been a really useful thing for me. And I've realized that a lot of when I look at the things that otherwise might have been called strengths, so the fact that in the beginning I was very technical, I was very comfortable in chaos, I really liked novelty and new ideas. A coach helped me understand that these things are all their own weaknesses in disguise. And so when you think about being comfortable in chaos, it means you don't like planning. Right? Or if you like new ideas all the time, you don't like following through on things. Or if you like to build great relationships with people and like it when people like you, then you are really uncomfortable with conflict and holding people accountable. And so that switch went off when I realized that, because it means that even your strengths can become liabilities, and that's something that we all have to work on.
I think a lot of people, I mean, I think that bit applies to basically everyone here. I'm very much interested by the fact that you have a coach. Is this coach, if you could elaborate, I mean, is this somebody who is an expert in management, or what kind of coaches? I mean, yeah. Yeah,
so there's a pretty good industry of executive coaches, and we're in San Francisco, and so there's a bunch of folks locally who do this kind of thing. We actually have a team of coaches who work with our management team. So actually all of my team is working with a team of coaches. And yeah, it's a fascinating experience. And I've had different coaches over the years for a couple of reasons. I think one of the hardest parts of being CEO, especially being CEO in a company that's growing really quickly, is just when you feel like you're getting good at your old job, you get a new one. And the things that made you good at the old job, so for example, I was really good at engineering, and I wrote a lot of the early code, and I was sort of our first product manager and things like that, become a liability in your new job. And so I had to stop doing what I was best at, and it was frustrating for me, because then, and it felt like it was bad for the company too, because now we just lost a good engineer and got a bad manager to replace him. That's how I felt when I had to give up my coding responsibilities. But that has been happening every year or two since the beginning, and continues to happen today. And so a lot of the things that I might personally really love to do or be involved with, I find myself becoming a bottleneck for the company, because I slow down decisions, because people need to wait for me to work through my pile of stuff before anything can move. And so you have to have coaching is one way you can discover weaknesses like that, and then having a good relationship with your management team is another one, and being able to trust people, and if you have great talent, it's easier to divide and conquer.
I think not everybody here could afford a management coach. So in place of a management coach, I mean, what would you suggest would be a good coach instead?
Well, I think the coaching is actually not that expensive, but I think so. And if any kind of venture-funded company, it will be a pretty small item on the expense line, and I would argue totally worth it, because even if you're paying someone, hundreds of dollars an hour, you're managing a budget of millions of dollars, and so directing that spend a little better, or making a little bit smarter decisions when it's that kind of stakes, is a pretty good investment. But it took a while before I had a coach, and that's when things like having founders, or having friends who were founders who were maybe 6 months ahead or 12 months ahead, and maybe spending a little bit of time with people who were like 5 years ahead was pretty valuable. And actually having the friends who were a little bit ahead, their advice was often more useful than the person who was like the 20-year veteran. Because what you actually have to deal with as a founder in the early days is things like, all right, we need to get our first office space, or we need to find a lawyer to help us close our financing. Asking someone with 25 years of experience or some famous founder about that, they're actually not going to have as much useful advice, because they can't remember what it was like compared to your friend or your former roommate or the person in the same startup accelerator as you. And so, but what you want to have is a portfolio of different people and different and different books or different inputs that help you learn.
I think it's really reassuring for most of us here that you don't really need a professional coach. That as you said before, your friends actually the friendly rival that you have is actually a really good coach, and I think that's really heartening to know. We're running out of time. I want to open up the floor to questions. I think a lot of you have many questions to Drew. So if you have questions, you could ask them in Japanese or English. Please raise your hand so that one of the many people on the floor will come to you with a microphone. Okay, I see somebody already over there waving. Is that a woman? Her hand over there? Over there, please. Yeah, right there. Yeah.
Maybe it's better I stand up so you can see me. I'm indeed a woman. Good day, Tawai Muller from Jiro, Japan. Thank you very much for your presentation. I have to say that Dropbox really saved us a lot of nerves when I was working in Paris and helped us better communicate with our colleagues in London and Washington, D.C. offices. So thank you for that. We're in Tokyo, so maybe just to give a little bit of Japanese context, as you know, under Abenomics, currently the government is leading on the work style reform, hataraki kata. So I'm just wondering, because maybe just to let you know, the whole idea is to capping long work hours and to be more efficient and so on. So maybe if you can comment on how Dropbox can contribute to that. Thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah, this is something I've been learning about recently, and it's something where we'd love to help. And I think there's a lot of opportunity with Dropbox and other companies to make the situation better. And I think there are two parts. So first is just individual productivity or team productivity, making it so you can accomplish more in less time. As much as there's room for improvement in as much as we can all imagine that, or as many things that are frustrating about the tools we use today, they're still better than moving physical pieces of paper around. So what we think about is, okay, well, what are we going to have tomorrow that's going to make today look archaic like that? In our personal lives, we live in a world of like self-driving cars and drones and virtual reality. But for some reason at work, we're still using tools that are like 30 years old. This is crazy to me. And so we want to continue building things like Dropbox Paper, which are which are basically a modern rethinking of some of the elementary tools we use every day. But one way or another, we want to bring that 60% of time spent about work down as much as possible. The second thing is we can offer people a lot of flexibility. And so one thing that we find a lot of our teams do with Dropbox Paper, and I think that dot by dot video is an example, is you basically have a virtual workspace, which means you don't actually have to have everybody physically in the same room at the same time. And so people can work from anywhere. You can have people inside your company. You can have people outside your company all working in the same space. Dropbox, a lot of the tools that we're building are designed for this much more modern and much more fluid nature of teamwork that we have today that's been enabled by the cloud and enabled by mobile. So now that we have these new platforms, we should have some new tools. So those are a couple areas where we think we can help and the rest of the industry can help.
Thank you. Any more questions? I see a hand up right there in the middle. Yes.
So right now there's a lot of hype about AI, and so a lot of the things you talked about, work, do you think any of that can be automated, be more efficient using artificial intelligence?
Absolutely. I think that is probably the single most exciting opportunity, because what's happened in the last few decades is when you think about what IT or information technology in general has allowed, or the problem it solved, was that information was scarce, and the challenge is how do you copy the information, make it available to everyone. Now we have basically the opposite problem, which is information overload. And so there's just we are all I mean, I imagine most of us in this room are going to wake up tomorrow with way more email than we ever wanted to receive. And it's the way we interact with it is still hasn't really changed since in 20 years, right? So everything's just sorted by time. It's a mess. And then we all have to be our own kind of librarians, like filing things away. And we can't focus anymore because everything's just blinking at us. And so machine learning and even primitive techniques can really help with this. Because I think any information task machines are really good at. And so in the future, and this is certainly something we're working on, a lot of verbs or a lot of activities that like organizing information or prioritizing how you spend your time or searching for things. These will increasingly be done by machines, or we need them to. And if not done entirely, at least heavily assisted by machines. And that's why I think the frontier of machine learning and artificial intelligence is going to be transformative in how we work.
Okay, one last question. Okay, right there in the front. Second. Over here, please.
Thank you, Mr. Houston. I remember last year, it was one of your interviews, you talked about people, good entrepreneurs are obsessed with problem solving, and you compared with tennis ball with your dog. And there you mentioned about you need to put yourself in an environment that pulls the best out of you. Can you define the environment here? And as a person who just passed 30, can you give some advices for people who are in their 20s, like what should we focus on and those kind of stuff to become an entrepreneur and to be prepared for the future?
Sure. So I gave the commencement address at MIT, which is where I went to school, and I gave that speech a few years ago. So those are some of the themes that I talked about. So I think when it comes to having an environment that pulls great things out of you, I certainly think about going to a good engineering school. That made me, studying computer science at MIT made me have to work harder than I will ever have to work again. I saw more kind of sunrises, the least romantic sunrises you can possibly imagine during that experience. And it just really taught you both how to work hard, but then when you think about the overall environment and the students that go there, or really any good school, that's an example of something where your bar gets reset for what good looks like. And because there was like good at math, like in high school, and then good at math at a place like that, and it's very different. And then, so it creates a sense of competition, both a friendly competition, and forces you to up your game, and that's really valuable. And then the people you meet there go on to do interesting things. And so when I think about who we hired as our first employees, they were all our smartest friends from school, or at least a lot of them were. And that school is just one example. We did Y Combinator, which was really valuable. We have a lot of founders. That was its own community. Again, I mentioned conferences. Like things like this are a community like that where you can encourage each other, make friends, and learn from each other. And so those are it almost doesn't matter so much what the specific environment is, as long as you surround yourself with people who inspire you and sort of and force you to raise your game. So again, it's really great to be back here, and thank you all so much for having me.
Thank you, Drew. I think, I know there's still questions around, but unfortunately we've run out of time. So big round of applause for Drew, please. Thank you very much.